gardens are also very much connected with spirituality. A metaphor for your personal growth is like taking care of the garden. So you take care of yourself, you take care of your soul, you grow your soul, and exactly in the same way like you grow a garden. So you get rid of weeds, which might be, toxic thoughts, and you grow things and hoping that those things might enrich your life. And then in the process, you learn that some things are for you and some things are not really for you.
Welcome back to The Last Days of Rome. In today's episode, I speak with Carlo Gabriele, an Italian landscape designer based here in Melbourne. With Carlo, we talk about the spiritual dimension of gardening, the importance of gardening for mental health, and how you too can create the garden of your dreams on a budget. I hope you enjoy it. So thank you for speaking with me, Carlo. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm going to start off with an improvised question because just before this interview, Gabriele, my producer, and I was speaking about the differences between Italian gardens and English gardens. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is an Italian garden in general is more curated, whereas an English garden is more natural. Is that true? And what are the positives of both of those?
It is very much true. Italian gardens were born in a particular environment. You know that, our country is very diverse in terms of landscape. So we have hills, we have mountains, and that was one of the challenges. And Italian gardens are adapted to that particular landscape. So often they are heavily engineered. So one of the main characteristics are terraces. So there is a lot of control of the land, and also, the architecture made out with the plans follow the same principles. English gardens were born in a completely different environment and also in a different historical moment. So there was, when they were born, a return to nature. So, and I would say the celebration of nature. So they have this natural look, and also the plants are treated in a very different way. So instead of being, cut and instead of being trimmed, they are left with a natural shape. Once again, for celebrating nature in all the aspects.
Yeah, interesting. So I went on your website, and we're going to link to that in the description so people can check that out.
Mm-hmm.
I saw so many of the gardens you've done, and I loved them. But as someone who's a non-expert, I can sort of, very similar to architecture, very similar to food or fashion, I know what I like or don't like, but I don't necessarily have the vocabulary to articulate why.
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways that I can conceptualize garden spaces so that I'm better able to curate a garden that I like?
Yeah. So usually, our culture, our own culture in regards of garden is very different, or our preparation is very different than, in regards of interiors or architecture. Because let's say probably you have at your place, you have 5-6 magazines that have the interior design or architecture as topic, and probably zero related to gardens and gardening. Like everything else, it's a matter of watching as many things you can in terms of pictures and videos. Also, I don't know if you travel, and when you travel, if you go and visit gardens. So the more you see, the more you understand what you like, and the more your culture, let's say, improves. It takes time, unfortunately. I remember that I was doing a trip in France back in the days. I'm talking about 20 years ago, and I was my partner at the time, and so we visited probably 10, 12 gardens or something like that, and at the end it was exhausted, and like we were walking because French parks, French gardens are very large. So I don't know how long we walked that day, and exhausted at a certain point. At the end of the day, he turned to me, and he looked at me with this desperate face, and he said, "I don't know what you want from my life, but I don't want to do this anymore." So it takes a lot of passion for sure, and it takes a lot of time, and a curiosity is always the key.
Was that from the walking aspect, or just from you constantly pointing everything out?
Probably both.
Yeah,
Of course, like we walked 4 kilometers that day.
But imagine a chef talking about things like texture, for example. What might be some of the things that you would notice? Something that I wouldn't even think of when looking at a garden, you know?
Yeah, probably something that is missing, especially at the beginning, is the sense of the whole space, or the space as a whole. Just to give an example, my mom, keen gardener, but usually what she does and what she used to do was filling, that corner and that garden bed and that area that she added. So instead of thinking to the garden as a whole space, she was more, curating one corner, the other corner, etc. Designing a garden is it is a bit of a different kind of work, because basically you have to tell a story, right? So, and for telling the story, you have to think of a theme and creating a theme, and the theme has to be declined in every aspect of the project. So it takes a bit of work.
So you'd say your mum's garden was more eclectic? It didn't sort of all fit together? Corners were completely different from one another?
It was a bit of a hodgepodge of things. So it was more, it was very disconnected.
Right.
That's probably the right word.
Did you ever tell her that?
Yes, we had massive fights over the garden, because that initially we say that the son of the shoemaker always has broken shoes. So that's the kind of situation with my parents. So the garden is always very messy, and they don't accept any help. Also, for my mental health, I decided that I didn't want to get involved with that, because I tried once.
To fix the garden?
Yes, and it was a very interesting experience that I don't want to repeat. I don't want to repeat anymore.
Because the garden was in such disarray, or because there was resistance to you getting involved?
Very much resistance, yeah. So I guess that, the dynamic of the family within a family are always very much complicated. And when there is this sort of, work relationship, those dynamics get dragged into the work relationship, and the drama is out there. And Italian families, we love drama.
What? I hadn't heard. Really?
Some of them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think also it probably has something to do with, I imagine, gardens being such a personal thing for people. It expresses themselves in a way. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe in a way your mum read it as you intervening in a form of self-expression that maybe she didn't even know she had,
Absolutely. It is very true that gardens bring out things, like personal things, like I've never seen before. Not even in with interiors or architecture. When we talk about gardens, people bring out things that are aspects of themselves that are very intimate. Or I remember, I worked once in Milan when I was back in Milan with this woman, very tough. She ran a advertising and communication firm, huge and very successful. So just to give you an idea, she used to travel between Milan and China, because she had business on both countries, and very successful, one of the most well-known in Milan. And she is very feared. So before starting to work with her, people who work with her told me, be careful, because she can be very difficult. And with me, we started to talk about plants, etc. And she was the sweetest person you could imagine. So it's interesting how, the garden is true that brings out very personal things and the aspects of people that are maybe hidden sometimes. Maybe because it's a space where we feel in some ways protected, and we allow ourselves to show those sort of emotion, feelings, or once again aspects of ourselves that usually we mask a bit.
Yeah. Do you think you're able to make observations going the other way? So you met her and then she told you about her taste in a garden. But do you ever look at somebody's garden first and make observations about the person?
Definitely. Yeah, it is very much a projection. The garden is very much a projection of the person.
Right.
So, some people might be more control. They might like control, and the gardens are more structured. And at the opposite, I have in particular a client, and she is a rebel, and she wanted me to design a garden would reflect these aspects of herself. So the garden is very much naturalistic, I'd say. So no trimmed hedges, no controlled plants, but it's more looking like a meadow or looking like a piece of nature, I'd say.
Yeah, interesting. I'm a very disorganized person to the point where it borders on dysfunction.
Yeah.
I would say that my taste in gardens is probably the complete opposite, maybe because I'm trying to overcompensate. So I love the look of curated gardens. Does that make sense, where people also try and, in a garden, maybe correct aspects of their personality?
That might happen too. So probably, I don't know if you have, I don't want to say you don't like this aspect of yourself, but maybe you try to compensate through, what you do in the garden. I was a bit like you when I was younger. I don't know how old you are.
I'm 32.
Okay. So you're definitely younger than me. I'm 47, and I was like you when I was younger, and now I've changed completely perspective. I just let things go. I'm a very lazy gardener, and I like very much the garden look a bit scruffy. Because also, this when you try to control a garden, when you try to control nature, you always lose. You never win, because nature is way more powerful than us. So there's no point. But even that's a revolution. That's sorry, not a revolution. That's an evolution in the taste, in your personal taste, because. If it's true that, especially in the past, controlled gardens were in vogue very much, now the global trend is moving towards a naturalistic garden. So this sort of recreation of nature, in every scale. It could be, in a country estate or in a small city garden. That's actually what's happening in my world. So people are demanding more and more these gardens that are more naturally looking, more than manicured.
Yeah, interesting. So you're more of an English garden type of guy.
Definitely. I like very much flowers. I'm a very romantic person, so I like that sort of word that is, colorful, romantic, and also those sort of gardens are they look more alive in some ways, because you have birds constantly feeding on flowers, and you have insects, etc. So you learn to accept these presences that sometimes might damage your work, and to work around them. So it's a sort of blessing.
Yeah, interesting. I mentioned off camera before the interview started that I had, in the past couple of years, recently taken up gardening, and I noticed that for me, it helped with a sense of purpose in a way. And do you think that gardening in general is kind of underrated in the context of mental health, which is something that we talk about a lot, in public discourse, but very rarely is gardening connected to that?
Well, absolutely. I find that mental health is something that should be discussed more and more, and definitely gardening and gardens are hyper connected with mental health for a series of reasons. Like, first of all, like, that when you have a walk, for example, in nature, and you feel relaxed, do you know why you feel relaxed? So basically, green is the only color that your eye doesn't need to focus, if you know what I mean. So there's not you don't have that constant work, and that relaxes you. That produces that feeling of relaxation first. Gardening and gardens are deeply connected with mental health. You said like it gives you a sense of purpose, and that's something very important and very true. That's why, for example, gardening has been brought in aged cares or those hospitals. For example, there is a beautiful book that has been written by a English lady about mental health and gardens, and she's a psychologist. And funnily enough, she is the wife of one of the most renowned garden designers in England, and she treats all the aspects. So researchers have highlighted this deep relationship between well-being and gardens, nature, etc. Absolutely, I think that it's something that should be talked more and reinforced. Gardens are also very much connected with spirituality. Which is, it could be one of those terms that people can be a bit afraid of because it might sound a bit whimsical or whatever. But, if you think about it, your personal growth is a metaphor. Your personal growth is like taking care of the garden. So you take care of yourself, you take care of your soul, you grow your soul, and exactly in the same way like you grow a garden. So you get rid of weeds, which might be, toxic thoughts, and you grow things and hoping that those things might enrich your life. And then in the process, you learn that some things are for you and some things are not really for you. Like you were mentioning, for example, that you're having some issues with the plants.
Yeah.
You're growing, so at a certain point, you might think maybe that's not for me.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because even, in the past when I've had a plant like a calathea not make it, it almost becomes I get a sense of personal failure as a way. So there's definitely a connection between, me and the things I'm trying to grow.
Yeah.
So you asked me a question off air about my favorite interview, and I wanted to ask you the same thing anyway. It's going to sound like I've copied your question, but, through all the gardens you've done, do you have one that you're exceptionally proud of or more than one?
Yeah, actually, yes. It's really funny because probably a garden I'm extremely proud of is my first garden, which was my balcony in Milan. So I used to live in a first floor in a first floor of a old building, and there was this tiny balcony, 3x1. And I when you're young, and you're starting with your career, you want to be seen desperately. So I ended up by creating this balcony by using I don't know if I can say that, IKEA water cans. And those IKEA water cans, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but they are the water cans that have this sort of long beak.
Okay, I think
plastic ones, like 99 cents, something like that. And I use them as pots, and I hang them on the balustrade. So they were like 40 or 50 of these pots, all filled with plants. And the reason why I'm particularly proud of this job was that I took part of a competition with the balcony, and it was a stupid one. It was a competition promoted by a supermarket. So, the prize was 100 euros or something like that. And, you're young, you don't have much money. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And I was like so sure that I would win. But the funny thing was that in the jury of that competition, there was a woman, a very well-known woman in this industry back in Italy. And she used to run a association called Horticola. And she wrote endless books about gardening, and she's been a garden designer for ages, etc. A very important person. I didn't know that she was in the jury at all, and she rang me. So she saw the pictures. She rang me and she said, "You know what? I like very much what you've done. I think that we need more people like you. with that sort of creativity, and then after that we started a collaboration. So that was super cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. Did you actually win the competition though?
I
Oh, you
did.
did win it. Okay. Yeah, that's very cool. I want to come back for a second because you mentioned that, so green is the only color that we don't have to process, right? So that gives us a sense of calm. I was about to say, but I didn't bring it up earlier. Yeah, when I look at a tree as well, just in general, it's got a very calming effect. I always assumed, because sometimes I like to come up with theories without doing any research, it's just easier. In a way, does that have anything to do with like our kind of monkey past in a way? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Do you think we get a sense of calm from trees and nature because it's a sort of memory in a way?
Absolutely. I mean, you know that like we are not that evolved,
Right.
So certain things.
I mean, you've seen my producer.
Certain things haven't changed, despite for how long we've been around. So nature for sure can project or can give you a sort of sense of danger in some situations, but also it definitely is definitely linked to calm. It gives you a sense of proportion, like you mentioned a tree, and if you think about what do you feel when you you observe a large tree. I don't know if it's the same for you, but I feel like very much connected with nature in that moment. First of all, and also it gives me that perspective and proportion. Like I don't feel like it's me and mine, but okay, I'm actually part of a system or part of something that is bigger than myself, etc. So definitely, I think that as you said, certain feelings we feel when we are immersed in nature are definitely linked with our ancestors or where we come from. We can say.
I guess it used to be, a safe place, the tree, right?
Yes.
Away from all the predators on the ground and stuff. But anyway, this is devolving into the Joe Rogan podcast now. Okay, I would assume, and I don't know, so check out his website. But I would assume that most people maybe, I don't know what you charge, but maybe they wouldn't be able to afford to have their own landscaper. What tips would you give people to transform their garden on a budget?
Yeah. Yes and no. Of course, the service I provide is probably for a certain kind of clients, but starting a garden or having a garden doesn't necessarily have to be a expensive exercise. Like I've done my own garden and I'm growing my own garden, where I've actually collected a lot of plants through the marketplace from people that didn't want them in their gardens anymore. So, for example, I'm very passionate about tree ferns, which is a fern that only grows here in Australia, and I couldn't have them back in Italy. So now that I can, I want them all, and I collected, let's say, 14, 15 tree ferns from people that actually wanted to throw them away, and they are all mature. And I'm talking about, plants, let's say 2.5, 3 meters tall, something like that. And actually, it was really funny how I how I moved them and I transported them in my own garden, because I drive a small car, and but I don't have much sense of space for in regards of my car. So I used to move and these huge plants with these very large fronds in my car, and it was a very funny scene, because you would see, I don't know, plants and fronds everywhere, and just the hands on the wheel and the face, and everything else just fronds and greenery, etc. So
it's like a jungle in the car.
Yeah, something like that. Or a lot of plants can be divided and propagated by division, like actually quite easily. So I think that a good planning would be a good place where to start, and then once you know what you want and once you understand what is your final goal, you can start to, collect the plants and divide the plants, etc. And it might take a bit longer, but, who cares? I mean, it doesn't have to be. I think that, like, when they say the most interesting part is actually the journey and not the destination, because the destination with gardens changes constantly. So, you start with an idea, or you start with some plants that you want, and then you see something else, you want that. So everything changes.
Right.
The color scheme changes. So it's a bit of a process that you have to accept. You never finish.
It's a living project.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But it doesn't have to be expensive.
Right. Do you have a photo of you in that car with all the plant surroundings?
No, actually not.
It's a
Yes,
shame.
yeah, no, it's a shame.
So in our email correspondence, you mentioned the importance of gardens for immigrant communities as a way to maintain a connection to their home country. Can you elaborate on that as a concept?
Well, I mean, growing plants is part of our identity, especially, talking about Italians. And if you think about, how many Italians, that grow a vegetable garden, and how many Italians, grow in their vegetable gardens, maybe plants that they used to grow back in Italy. So it's like, we try to recreate through gardens or kitchen gardens moments or feelings or aspects of a life that in some ways is not there anymore, and we keep it alive in this way. I do the same, like when I design, and maybe you're doing the same without knowing it. I definitely have all my memories of when I was a kid are deeply linked to the garden I grew up with. So all the birthday parties, all the most important moments of my life, my first kiss in the garden, or parties with friends, endless summers, when I was at school, school holiday, etc. All the fun. I have so many memories that are linked with the garden. And I probably, when I design, I probably try to recreate that happiness, that lightness, that sense of
Nostalgia.
protection. Yeah, absolutely, sense of protection. All those dreams that I had in terms of, what am I going to do when I be older, etc., etc., etc. That is very important for me. It's something that I keep very much in mind when I'm working with someone. So I always try to understand the kind of lifestyle the people I'm working for have, and I keep in mind. I try to give them, the perfect background. Sorry, for all the future memories that they're gonna have in the garden.
Yeah, that's a really lovely way to put it. It just reminds me, when I think about summer holidays growing up, a huge part of that backdrop, the sort of background of those memories, involves my Zia's garden, which had this massive fig tree, and I just loved summers. I spent a lot of time at her house, and I think that provided a very kind of important backdrop for me when I'm remembering that time.
And sorry, do you think that, like, because we mentioned before that you wanted to grow a fig tree, and do you think that you want to grow a fig tree because it's linked to that memory?
I think so. I'm very much chasing my youth.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I'm trying to get that time back. No, look, probably. I think so. Just like really beautiful memories, and there's a sense of calm and familiarity that comes from thinking about that tree. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, this is probably a bit too vague, but if you had to quickly give me a few plants or things that would belong in a quintessential Italian garden, what would they be? Presumably they would be region dependent, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Although, like, I would say so. Although the climate in Italy, now it's becoming more and more diverse from north to south. But I would say that, let's say from Tuscany to Sicily, it wasn't that different. Actually, Italian gardens were born more in the center of Italy. So I'm talking about Lazio, Tuscany, and the regions around, because they were also connected with money and power, etc. But probably, the elements of an Italian garden are hedges, and this treatment of the space and the landscape that is very much connected with the landscape itself, because we inherited that way of dealing with the territory from the Greeks. And the Greeks, they used to think that the landscape had there was the spirit of the place. So probably a Italian garden is a reinterpretation of a piece of land in the best possible way. And hedges probably accentuate certain aspects, certain architectural aspects of the garden, like the terraces, as I said, symmetries, perspectives. They were very ingenious, very ingenious. Also, water is very important in Italian gardens. I know it's been very confused because what I'm saying, because if I think of all the Italian gardens I know that and I visited, there's so much.
Right.
So it is a bit hard to summarize.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I had a feeling it would be, very region dependent, or perhaps my question was a bit vague. But when you say water is important, do you mean like having a pond or some sort of water feature in?
It is more, water is always present in a very much engineered way. So it's fountains and cascades and usually these elements are a piece of art. Like one of my favorite gardens is Villa d'Este at Tivoli, and there is this avenue called where there is a fountain, and actually the fountain is called the Fountain of the 100 Spouts. So you actually have 100 spouts on a row, so it's something that is really massive. You have to if we are talking about the Italian gardens back in the days, there are always gardens for showing off. So
showing off wealth?
Yeah, very much. There were also places where entertaining, which is exactly the same that has been done with French gardens. So they become this extension or this representation of the power of the king, and they are always the background for intrigues or political meetings, etc. Actually, funnily enough, I don't know if you know how the story about French gardens, but it's actually very interesting. So the first very French garden, which was a sort of reinterpretation of the Italian gardens, was born in a small town called Vaux-le-Vicomte. And it was actually done for someone that was working for Louis XV.
Okay.
And who was invited to a party in the garden. And once he saw it, he became extremely jealous of it, envious of it, and he ordered that the owner of the garden would be imprisoned and the garden go partially destroyed, and then he hired the landscape architect who designed it, and then he designed Versailles, which is the the best representation of the French.
What a beautiful story.
Not very much for the guy who ended up in prison, I guess.
What would be the difference then? So if it's a reinterpretation of an Italian garden, how would you differentiate?
Well, I mean, the scale is completely different, because the scale of Italian gardens is contained, or the size is contained, and is contained because of the territory, and the size of French gardens is so vast. I don't know if you ever visited Versailles, but it's like kilometers of garden, which is something that never happened in Italy. We don't have that much land.
Right. So, but I have been to Caserta.
Yeah.
And so that to me seemed similar to what you're talking about.
Because Caserta is actually a garden that is inspired to French gardens.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was also similar to the place you mentioned before Versailles. I don't recall it.
Vaux-le-Vicomte.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Would you say that was kind of similar?
Smaller size, but they're very much similar. It is really the first example of a French garden. So this actually often when they created these gardens, they modified deeply the land. So while, for example, in Italy we created retaining walls because the land was had different levels, etc. Often in France, they just knocked down everything and made it flat for having this very, very, very vast perspective.
Interesting. So we've pretty much been talking about greenery in the private sphere. I mean, even, when it comes to palaces, they're very much private spaces.
Yeah.
How important is it in the public space? And do you think we can, do you think you can make any judgments about society at large based on, their city's use of greenery or lack of greenery?
Definitely. I think that even for, on a public scale, greenery and the availability of greenery is super important. It is, especially in cities, very needed. And I think there is a craving for quality public spaces. And if we talk about this topic, for example, one of the examples that come to my mind is the High Line in New York, which is a beautiful park that has been built on a ex-railway track. And it has become a sort of, pilgrimage destination. And it's become a very vibrant space where they organize, volunteering days and meetings, art competitions. It's something that, there's actually this group of volunteers that take care of the park and do the maintenance. So I think that especially in cities where there's so much there, the density of population, density of humanity is so high. We really need the spaces where we can reconnect in some ways. We can slow down and we can sort of reestablish a healthy relationship with nature that is always there. And sometimes, sometimes we forget because within the city is really easy to forget that actually, our natural environment is not buildings and concrete, but it's actually nature.
Yeah, and I feel like spending too much time in cities without that sense of greenery probably, does some sort of damage to the psyche, right?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
I can't think of a city that does it better than New York, mixing the sort of parks, and the concrete. Having said that, when I was there were times when I still had to get out. But generally speaking, the High Line you mentioned, Washington Square Park is a beautiful park, Central Park, obviously. Yeah. How would you rate Melbourne and Australian cities in general?
Well, there is a when I moved here, I was actually impressed about how much Australians or Melbournians they enjoy outdoor life. I think that there are quite a few spaces that are very much interesting, and what makes me happy in some ways is how people use them. So I see that there's so much participation in the use of this green space. Also, just to give you a sort of interesting insight. I don't know if you know or if you visited the Melbourne Botanic Garden.
I haven't.
Beautiful. You should go because it's very interesting. And that was awarded in 2013, I think, as the best park in the world.
Wow.
As a landscape architecture work.
So what's so special about it?
Well, it's a beautiful design space. It is a beautiful collection of Australian landscapes and Australian plants. The size is amazing, and the quality of the design is really outstanding.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so similar to my Italian garden question, if you were in Italy and somebody there said, "I want you to create an Australian garden for me," what would you do? I mean, presumably golden wattle would be a part of it. I don't know. How would you do that?
Yeah, it's interesting because like in Italy we started because like there are so many similarities between the some Australian climates and Italian climates. You know, Victoria in particular, for example, or South Australia, or certain areas of West
On this, I actually have seen a map of Australia,
Yeah.
and it's separated by the climate compared to other parts of the world. So which parts of the world have identical climates?
Yeah.
And Adelaide and Napoli have the exact same climate, which is interesting.
Yeah. So it's a Mediterranean climate. So and because of that, we have less restrictive laws in terms of importing plants, etc. I'm talking about Europe and Italy in particular. So we started to grow Australian plants 20 or 30 years ago.
Interesting.
So the range of plants that we could use is phenomenal, and it goes from bottle brush, callistemon. We have a lot of gums or grevilleas. It's really very diverse. Also, we have a tradition in terms of nurseries that is absolutely phenomenal back in Italy. So they have several specialized growers. So sourcing plants, Australian plants, would be really easy. A different thing would be, saying I want, or translating this wanting an Australian garden with a actual project. Because my first question would be, what does that mean?
Right.
Because Australia is so diverse. So what are we talking about? Are we talking about the outback? Are we talking about the tropical areas or coastal areas? I mean, this would be my first question. But it also works in reverse, because a lot of times I get asked for a Mediterranean garden, and I always ask, what do you have in your mind? Because which area of the Mediterranean are we talking about? Because it could be Spain, France, Italy, Morocco, Greece. So it's a matter of getting to know each other and trying to understand a bit better the kind of person I'm talking to, and also trying to understand better the idea or the dream that person has in his or her mind, and explore that a bit better, a bit more.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned the Mediterranean garden, which is something I wanted to ask you about, because for you, this is a big thing in the context of climate change. How Mediterranean gardens are, kind of more appropriate going into a warmer climate. Can you talk a bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, easy. We live in a world where if you look at how things in terms of climate are proceeding, I mean, half of the world is burning and the other half of the world is drowning. So we have this imbalancement in terms of climate, and things are becoming more and more extreme. I don't think we have seen much here in Australia yet. For example, in Italy, summers are becoming drier and hotter every time. I went back, and I don't want to say this to banalize, make it, the last couple of years I went back to Italy in October. I had 30 degrees all the time for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, which is so unprecedented. But all my friends that are growing gardens are struggling more and more for the lack of water, for the heat, etc. And Mediterranean plants are often engineered for surviving in these sort of extreme changes or extreme conditions. So lack of water, extreme temperatures, etc. Because they have solutions, biological solutions that allow them to survive. For example, one aspect could be that they get dormant in summer, or they have structures, or their leaves can retain more water or lose less water, etc. And I find that Mediterranean plants, and when I say Mediterranean, I mean coming from Mediterranean regions of the world, which are Australia, the Mediterranean basin, but also California, South Africa, etc. So all these plants work really well in this climate, and also, they can help us to save more water, still, having a garden that look nice and lush, etc. Also, some of the solutions of Mediterranean gardens are, let's say, probably not that popular yet, but I think that can become more and more important for the future. Like, for example, getting rid of the lawn. A lawn is a surface that requires a lot of watering for looking good. So you could go two ways. One would be you watering or you water it naturally. So in summer it gets brown, and then like with the first rains in autumn it becomes green again. Or you get definitely rid of the lawn and you change it with something else, which could be gravel or it could be a ground cover, etc. So it's like, Mediterranean gardens are basically observing how the world is evolving and, making adjustments accordingly.
And you're saying that aspect isn't popular right now, removing the lawn? There's resistance. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that it is very much still.
I mean, not from the Italian community. They did that decades ago. So
yeah, I know the story that like we love concrete a lot here, apparently.
Oh, you haven't? That's a thing. Go the northern suburbs here. You'll see nothing but concrete in all of these homes. Okay, so let's combine climate change with what we've been speaking about earlier, which is the importance of gardening in the context of mental health and a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Do you think, on the other hand, there's any danger in over-romanticizing gardening in a way that the wellness industry does with something like meditation, for example, where overemphasizing the importance of curating one's own sort of perfect private world leads to maybe a form of escapism from the real world and the sort of challenges that are there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Of course, that there's always the risk of, romanticizing gardens, etc., because it's also a big industry. So, we sell dreams, etc. So, every time that money is involved, there is also marketing involved and, whatever comes with that. It is also true that, and that is deeply true, that the benefits of, having a garden, growing a garden, looking at a garden are there. We don't, and they are, they can't be doubted because they are very true on a empiric base, but also, on a more scientific base, because, there are a lot of studies in regards of it. There is need for a bit of balance between the two aspects. Sometimes, greenery or gardens are used for, greenwashing things. And I think that it needs to be called out. Like, let's say, for example, I don't know, a building gets built and it's like this massive concrete tower or whatever, and then they put a few plants here and there, and then they start to use terms like ecological or whatever. I mean, I'm sure that you've seen this many times, and that needs to be called out because show me the data. Why are you saying that this helps for, I don't know, reducing CO2 or reducing the heating or whatever? There are, other works that have solid foundations and in terms of, the use of greenery, for example, for modifying or changing those aspects or outcomes, like, for example, the heating, etc. And in those cases, those sort of works should be brought as an example for, similar actions. But yeah, I think that there is always a bit the risk for these themes to be
exploited, maybe.
Yeah, a bit or overused.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so and then coming back again to the benefits of gardening that you mentioned, have scientific research behind them. Another issue is that all of this presupposes that people are able to do it because they own the property they live on, which they don't. So do you think that for renters, there should be rules where renters are able to, change the garden they're renting to their own taste? If there are benefits for mental health and other forms of well-being, should it be easier for people who don't necessarily own their home to be able to do that?
Absolutely. I think that there should be more openness and in regards of this, and definitely, I mean, everyone who wants to get involved and do gardening should be allowed to do it, because it's really something that is good for your mental health for sure.
Awesome. Well, I think we leave it there. That was awesome. Carlo, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun.
I really appreciate it.
Did you enjoy that? Well, then why not subscribe? What's wrong with you? This is why people are worried about you, the choices you make. Click the little subscribe button and make people proud.